Paul in Brooklyn, New York. Hey, Paul, what's up?
Hey, Tom. Let me just disclose that I'm an avid Bernie supporter. And by the way, I agree with you on the concern over Bernie's message on democratic socialism looking to Scandinavian countries. But I want to point out something that's been irritating to me since Tuesday, besides the fact that despite most political pundits claiming victory for Hillary in the debate, that the majority of online polls from the people stated otherwise. But I don't love these debates because they turn what should be a debate about critical issues into an entertainment value when the value should be placed on the issues and things that the candidates are actually saying.
Right.
Bernie exploited this by bringing up how ridiculous it was to politicize and promote Hillary's so-called email scandal. And I think, by and large, as people in this country, we tend to go, I think X person did better than Y person in the debate. I'm voting for X because of that, versus let me take a second to stop, sit down, and understand and comprehend what these people are actually saying,
right,
and let me decide which candidate I like based on that information. For example, why are we as people, as corporate media, I could go on a whole other rant about that, but why are we as people not criticizing Hillary more about her comment that she went to Wall Street and said, cut it out? As Bernie said, that is an extremely naive way to look at the power of bankers and speculative finance. I can't imagine an alternative world
right,
where if Bernie said the same comment as Hillary, it wouldn't be a major media story. So I guess my first question is, as people who want to live in a democracy, why are we ignoring these issues that help us figure out how to accomplish that, but instead worrying about who performed better in a debate? And maybe a more important question would be, do you think Bernie is going to have to go more on the attack here? And when I say the attack, I don't mean negative political ads. I mean
right,
clearly defining and differentiating himself on the issues from Hillary by exposing the gray areas and lack of consistency.
Yes, he does. Yes, he does, Paul. He absolutely does. And Paul, thank you for the call. You just identified a great fault line. Do you have the clip? How long is it? Okay. Well, I want the Kennedy part that follows it too. So, okay, we're going to have to do this on the other side of the break. But I'll give you the setup right now, and then on the other end of the break, we'll play this clip for you because we only have about 40 seconds here before we hit a commercial break. Back in 1960, when Richard Nixon and John Kennedy were debating each other, one of the issues that came up is, what are you going to do about the fact that you've got these, lunch counters, you've got these dime stores down in the South that will not let African Americans sit at the lunch counter. And Richard Nixon says words to the effect of, and you'll hear this at the end after we come back from the break. Richard Nixon in the debate says, well, what I would do is I would get all the presidents of these stores together and I'd ask them to behave nicely. Right? And I mean, this is a guy who'd been vice president for 8 years, during which time no black person could sit on a lunch counter down in the South. So they go to Jack Kennedy and they say, Senator Kennedy, what do you say? And Senator Kennedy basically says, I'd use Title 8 or Title 10 or whatever it is, some federal law, totally kick their asses. And, I'm paraphrasing. You'll hear the actual comment on the other end. But this is a very, very real difference of perspective. And essentially what the caller just pointed out is that's the difference between Hillary and Bernie with regard to the banks.
You're listening to the Thom Hartmann Program. Call 202-536-2370.
Hillary suggested she wants to talk to them. Bernie suggested he wants to kick their butts. Now, I suspect if Hillary becomes president, she'll kick their butts too, but she's not talking about it. Okay, so here's these. This is the kind of stuff, and thanks so much to our last caller. I think his name was Tony. But whatever. Thanks so much to our last caller for pointing this out. And this is not so much a Hillary versus Bernie thing. This is a fundamental core worldview thing that really should be an important part of our dialogue as a country. And it should be an important part of our dialogue in the context of the Democratic debates. And frankly, the Republican debates as well. And nobody's talking about it. And that is, when is it appropriate to use government? Because government is a force. I mean, it's a power. Government has the power to take your freedom away. It has the power to take your life away. When is it appropriate to use that kind of force, to use government force, for social good, And when do you say, no, we're not going to use government force. We're going to like just trust the marketplace, or we're going to trust to the tender mercies of friendly billionaires or whatever, which is sort of like, the charter school movement and Bill Gates, oh, Bill Gates is funding. It must be a wonderful thing. Not so much. But anyhow, so I pointed out that contrast was vivid in 1960 in the debate between Richard Nixon and John Kennedy, the televised debate, where they were talking about what do you do about the fact that down in the South, and it wasn't just in the South, but I think that was the example. What do you do about the fact that down in the South, you have legal segregation? Keep in mind, this was 1960. This was before the Civil Rights Act or the Voting Rights Act were passed. There were entire counties in Alabama where maybe 1 or 2 African Americans were registered to vote, if that. How do you deal with that? Do you use the power of government, or do you use the marketplace? And the moderator basically asked this question of Richard Nixon and Jack Kennedy. And I'll just let you interpret their decision, their comments. Well, here, let's just play them. First it's Nixon, and then he goes to Kennedy. So here it is.
I have talked to Negro mothers. I've heard them try to explain how they tell their children how they can go into a store and buy a loaf of bread, but then can't go into that store and sit at the counter and get a Coca-Cola. This is wrong, and we have to do something about it. So under the circumstances, what do we do? Well, what we do is what the Attorney General of the United States did under the direction of the President. Call in the owners of chain stores and get them to take action.
So that's Nixon, and he's basically saying what Hillary Clinton said she'd do with the banks, which is talk to them. Here is Jack Kennedy's response to that question.
Senator Kennedy. Well, Mr. Nixon hasn't discussed the 2 basic questions. What is going to be done, and what will be his policy on implementing the Supreme Court decision of 1954? Giving aid to schools technically that are trying to carry out the decision is not the great question. Secondly, what's he going to do to provide fair employment? He's been the head of the Committee on Government Contracts. It's carried out 2 cases, both in the District of Columbia. He has not indicated his support of an attempt to provide fair employment practices around the country so that everyone can get a job regardless of their race or color. Nor has he indicated that he will support Title III, which would give the Attorney General additional powers to protect constitutional rights. These are the great questions. Equality of education in school. About 2% of our population of white people is illiterate, 10% of our colored population. 60 to 70% of our colored children do not finish high school. These are the questions in these areas that the North and the South, East and West are entitled to know. What will be the leadership of the President in these areas to provide equality of opportunity for employment? Equality of opportunity in the field of housing, which could be done on all federal supported housing by a stroke of the President's pen. What will be done to provide equality of education in all sections of the United States? Those are the questions to which the President must establish a moral tone and moral leadership. And I can assure you that if I'm elected President, we will do so.
And he did. So basically, Nixon says, we'll talk nice to the billionaires and ask them to be friendly. And Kennedy says, we'll kick their ass with Title III. So I think that's a consequential difference. And it's one that we, frankly, should be discussing right now.